Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I am your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about chip away, which is the title of my new blog post that I put out a few days ago. I think it was Monday. Wrote it starting, I think it was last week, and then wrote it to the weekend, whatever. So we're going to talk about that blog post today, but I do have a couple of other updates and things that I want to talk about before that. The first thing is I just got notification that my physical copy of the book for author review has shipped. So it is on the way to my house right now. What's going on with my monitor? Can you hold on a minute? Hold on, everybody stop. Okay. I'm going to check my other thing over here. It might have been just this monitor. I got confused. Yeah, you can still see me. Okay, fine. It was just my monitor. We're having some technical difficulties here. Last week it was my computer that decided to go out. Now it's this thing over here. Goodness gracious. Anyway, yes, the book has been shipped to me. I do not have it in my hands, but once I have it in my hands, I will probably have another announcement over Wireframe to let people know. Additionally, there will be also other things about the book that I will be announcing also on the internet at the same time. So look out for that stuff. And then there was also some other cute CSS news that admittedly goes way over my head. But please check out the Design Systems Discord over here, right? Design Systems Discord at discord.ds.house. There's some really cool stuff that has been happening in CSS that you should absolutely take a look at in the Discord that I've linked to in there. The thing that I'm thinking about right now is that some person did a x86 computer architecture using CSS. So don't let anyone tell you that it's not a programming language, because clearly it is. But if you want the link to that, discord.ds.house, make sure that you take a peek over there. So what I wanted to talk to folks about today is this thing around chips and badges and tags and all these kinds of little UI elements that wind up in our web pages, in our experiences, and just overall are trying to, give us a little bit more information. But I think there's a couple of things that we're not thinking about when we consider these patterns. But first, what we'd like to do is ask AI about these patterns and see what AI has to say about this stuff. So let's give this a shot and see if it works today. You never can tell on these live shows if it's going to work or not, but we're just going to, do it anyway and see what happens. So here we go. Let's ask. Hey, what are your thoughts and guidelines and opinions and just overall information about UI patterns called chips and badges and tags and lozenges? Tell me about those patterns and what you know about them.
Badges and tags, also known as lozenges or chips, are common UI patterns used to provide quick visual cues and additional information about certain content or elements on a website or application interface. These elements are normally round or rectangular in shape and often contain a symbolic or alphanumeric icon and some short text or symbol. Badges and tags are used to highlight important or urgent information, mark new content or items, or provide additional information about other elements, such as categories, product ratings, or user statuses.
Okay, yeah. And are there any problems with those things usually being visually similar? I mean, are they usually visually similar, or how do people differentiate them visually between badges and tags and all these items?
Generally speaking, it is common for badges and tags to have similar visual appearances, as they often share a common structure, which usually consists of a small round or rectangular shape. However, they rarely have the same appearance, which allows for differentiation. Badges and tags are often accompanied by a short text or symbol to describe more contextual information about the associated content. Also, tags are usually placed inside a button, while badges are displayed next to the element they're referred to.
Okay, that was a little weird because it just said that there's like tags that are placed inside of buttons, which maybe, I guess, it's very confusing out there. And I think it's important to like, raise that it's confusing. I mean, that's the thing is that, there's so many different names for these things. They all look very similar. So I'm basically highlighting this in the post that I'm going to show you today. So this is at my blog called or blog is at blog.d'amato.design, just because I have so many things that are out there. But let's go to the computer and show you the post. So let's go over here. I am going to show you this, right? And then we're going to show you that. There's me. Hi, that's me. Right. So this is the post. It's my latest post on the blog. It's called Chip Away. And ultimately, one of the first things I basically talk about here is that there's lots of different names for these things. So the first thing I do here is I'm going to show you, and here on the blog post, that there's these three components that are all from the same design system. That happens to be Atlassian Design. They're all from the same design system. And when you look at them, they all look very similar. If you take the same content and put the same content in each one of them, they are practically the same. Sure, the one on the left doesn't have a border. I don't know if that happens to be meaningful or not, but ultimately, yeah, it's just the same kind of thing over and over again. So the question is, why would you ever need, these different things, right? So underneath here, I have a little game that we're going to play that basically says, okay, here's now the description from the design system documentation about each one of these. So one of them is a visual indicator used to communicate status. Another one is a compact label to classify, organize, and categorize information. And another one is used to display numeric status data, right? So obviously the numeric status data, you could see that with the number on top there, right? But visual indicator to communicate status, is design a status or is neutral a status? I don't know, right? Meanwhile, is neutral a label used to classify or categorize something? Like here's all the neutral stuff? I don't know, right? So this is the thing that I'm kind of calling out here effectively is that does it actually matter? I'm not too sure, ultimately, in the way that things are being presented here specifically, right? Because they're all very similar to each other in terms of how am I supposed to choose the little text that potentially has a background color that may or may not have interactivity, right? That's effectively what all these things are, whether or not whatever name they potentially have, right? However, you might want to justify having different ones. And again, I think having different ones is a huge problem because then you have to maintain each individual one, and that causes a problem with consistency, especially if, again, a designer is just trying to choose little text with background, may or may not be interactive, right? So that's the big problem that we have here, and I do have the answers for those things below. If you want to read that, I won't necessarily spoil it, other than you reading it off the page right now. But the next section talks about filters and categorization, because these things are typically used in many cases for basically categorizing something, saying that this is under the category of, I don't know, sports, and this is under the category of gaming, right? So you could tell what this thing is all about. And you can kind of think of this as like maybe for like news stories, like on the front page of a New York Times or something like that, where you want like the politics or the sports, like that's telling you the category in which this news story is kind of sitting inside of, right? So that really kind of helps out and says, okay, here's what you're about to, the category in which you're about to read here, the overarching category, right? Now, meanwhile, there's also the possibility of being able to filter by something, right? So you're filtering by the categorization that's out there. So these examples that I'm showing here are from a place called UXL, which has a lot of resources about UX and patterns and things like that. And these images, this is actually a do and don't images that are side by side. And the thing is, it's really hard to tell what the do and what the don't is from these images, because from a visual standpoint, they are actually identical. The left and the right visually are completely identical. But if you were to put them over each other pixel by pixel, you'll see what the difference is. And the difference happens to be the content inside of the buttons. And that's already a problem. Okay. And I say that's already a problem specifically because most of the time when we're talking about the UI of something, the way that it's being visually treated, that's usually a separate unit of work from the content that goes inside of these things, especially if it gets translated, right? So when we're talking about the UI presentation of something and what we're trying to present here, well, the problem is the do and the don't here. This is really just talking about content design because, again, the visual treatment between these things is exactly the same. Okay, so what they're trying to explain here a little bit in the original post that I'm outlining is that there's a difference between the idea of this chip and buttons, right? While they could look similarly, they work differently. That's awful, right? That's awful. Where you have two similar patterns but work differently. That's just awful, right? You're not meeting user expectations if that's the case. But when you use them as filters, these chips help users by narrowing down and adjusting what they see without leaving the current view, right? Meanwhile, buttons, they have like some action that you take place, right? Submit, cancel, those kinds of things. The problem is the filtering is an action, right? So that definition kind of goes under the wayside. And that's not great. Additionally, here's an example of how you could filter stuff using existing patterns called checkboxes, right? You could have filters that say show takeout locations and show vegetarian locations. You don't need to have this new UI pattern that suggests that it is the exact same thing that these things already do, right? And you're saying to yourself, okay, that's a little too much text, Donnie. I understand. Why don't you put that stuff under a label called location filters, and then you have takeout and vegetarian, right? Because especially in the example that's above, there are no labels in the example above. And in fact, it's actually really hard to tell what those things are for in this image. Because the text underneath here, I don't know if you can see it, but the text underneath here, it just says Spring Cafe and then ratings. And then there's these two button-like things. It doesn't say what the buttons are for. It doesn't say that it's filters. It doesn't say it's things that you could take action to. It literally just are these random buttons or chips, who knows what they are, underneath them. So it's hard to tell, should I interact with them, what they do when I interact with them. Like, if I press this vegetarian button-looking thing, does that turn me into a vegetarian? Obviously not, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here, right? Meanwhile, again, just by the content, place and order, that's a action, right? Cancel is an action. So it's showing you that these are actions. Meanwhile, it's ambiguous if these things are actions, right? Takeout only, is that an action? Is this how I order the takeout only? I don't know, right? It's hard to tell. And I mentioned this down here at the next section where I have something called Schrodinger's button. This is a take on Schrodinger's cat, which is you don't know if the cat is alive or unalive in the box until you open the box. This is the exact same thing, folks. Schrodinger's button is a button that you don't know if you can click or not until you actually click it, right? So that's what I'm basically saying here is that you have this thing that says pro in this lockup, and I can't tell if this is something that I'm supposed to click or not click, right? It looks, and it's visually, the composition of the thing looks like a button. It might be a little smaller, but it still looks like a button. So I don't know if I'm allowed to click it or not until you actually click it. And this might not be a problem to a lot of folks out there because they're used to clicking buttons and being okay with the ramifications of clicking a button. But for older folks, they are actually apprehensive of clicking buttons because they're not sure what it's going to do and they don't know how to get back from what they've just done. Right? There's a whole research that was done on this. I go ahead and I link to it over here. There's also this phobia about buttons that apparently Steve Jobs had. That's what's actually in that Wikipedia post. Apparently Steve Jobs had a fear of buttons. I'm not about to pronounce this phobia, by the way. You can go ahead and figure that out yourself. But yeah, it's entirely possible that people don't even try to click the button if that is actually a button because they're not sure, right? Maybe it's just a status, but who knows, right? I think it's a lot better if you're going to go ahead and want to convey something without it being clickable, make it clearly not clickable. So here's a mock-up that I did that just puts pro in the user avatar so you can see that the user is a pro, right? There's an option that you can do. Or have another option down here where you use text, small text, just like it would be in a tag, but you don't make it look like a button. You just make it look like smaller text. I mean, admittedly, this kind of approach, which normally would go above the name in this particular case, is the exact same approach that newspapers would have taken. Again, where that sports and that politics goes, it shows the overarching category of what we're talking about. In this particular case, pro member, it could be and I kind of argue it here, that pro member and photographer are both things that are describing this person. So maybe they belong in the same area, but just because pro member is not something that this person is able to provide themselves directly, it's from some status that's given to them. Maybe it's shown differently, and that differently that it's shown makes sure that it doesn't look like a button, doesn't make it look like it's clickable, unless it is. If it is clickable, right, then it's an action, and it goes underneath the actions where we're saying, hey, become a pro member, right? That's like a link that goes to like a upgrade or a pricing or whatever that says, oh, you want to be one of these people too? Great, go over here, right? Just again, don't make it ambiguous. I mentioned a little bit about the possibility of treating this with an icon. You have to be careful about the icons because the icons do suggest interactivity when you put them there. So something to be careful of course. But now we go into tag inputs. Now I'll tell you what. Tag inputs are really fun, interesting, quick ways of categorizing some entity, right? I think, ooh, goodness gracious, I'm getting excited. Hit my microphone. I think they're actually really fun in the way that I use them as a power user, right? I've been using these kinds of things at Stack Overflow when I would tag posts, and obviously in YouTube when you're tagging stuff. You know, being able to just go ahead and type and hit comma to like add stuff to an existing entity is really nice. All that being said, doesn't mean that it doesn't come with problems. And these are outlying problems, the outliers, that align with the problems that we have with accessibility, inclusive design. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. Basically, the first thing that we want to talk about here is what is the behavior when we're focusing these things, right? Just take a look at the screen if you're watching right now. But and if you're not watching, think about a tag input, right? Where you're typing into this box and you're able to create these little tags after you hit like a comma or space or enter. Think about what the focus kind of behavior should be, right? When I hit tab and I tab to one of the tags that I already created, what should be focused, right? Now, your first thought potentially is that, oh, okay, the whole tag should be focused. All right, well, if that's the case, then what about if I could remove the tag? Well, that means that there should be a removal button inside of the tag. So does that mean that I need to tab twice, once for the tag itself, and then another tab to get to the removal button? Right? That's already its own problem visually because you aren't supposed to put interactive things inside of other interactive things, right? But then you got to walk back a little bit and say, hold on a second, why is the tag interactive at all? It's entirely possible that the only thing that you can do with a tag once you tab to it is remove it, right? So if the only action is to remove, then technically, if I focus the entire tag, then the action is to remove it as opposed to having two different tabs. Because again, if you have to tab twice to get to each tag, that's extra keystrokes that you probably don't need. So again, think about why you're tabbing to the thing in the first place. What is the user about to do, right? It's entirely possible, again, that they don't need to do anything other than remove it, right? So then if you're going to go ahead and focus something, focus on the thing that it's about to do. If you focus the entire tag, right, and then hit enter, what does that do? Because if it only is meant to remove, that might not be what they're expecting. Maybe they're expecting enter to do a line break on the tag, and then, oops, it's gone, right? So that's a problem already. The next problem that I outline a little bit later here is that obviously you also have to do announcements, right? So when you add a tag, it needs to be announced to the user that it was added. So I mentioned a little bit about that here. But later on in this post, I talk about how in accessible technologies, sometimes you have dictation that's happening where how would you consider dictating into this tag input these new tags, right? In some cases, in some software, it's been reported that saying the word comma actually will say and type out the word comma as opposed to providing a comma there, right? Some of these things will inject commas where they believe commas should go in regular speech, as opposed to you physically saying the word comma, right? So that potentially breaks the possibility of this thing working the same way that a person would, again, type in the input. Something to be really careful about. The other thing that I researched in here is this idea of input method editors. This is effectively the way that Eastern Asian languages type in their characters. Basically, when they type a character on a keyboard, because keyboards don't have all of the Chinese characters, they have to have a menu pop up where you can select which character you want from that menu. So the act of selecting the character could prematurely trigger a tag being made, right? Which you don't want, right? So you have to fight you typing in that language in the tag input just to type in a single tag or a second tag, right? It just makes it really hard for folks that are not speaking English, not using a regular keyboard, to use this kind of input. So what's the solution there? Well, guess what? The solution, or at least one of them, is something that practically every developer has made. It's a to-do app. And how do you make a to-do app, or make a to-do app behave, right? How do you add to-dos? Well, you have some input. You type in the to-do that you want to add, and then you hit an add button. That's it, right? And now there's no parsing of delimiters. There's no dependence on commas being eaten. There's no IME conflicts. And there's no dictation ambiguity, right? You could dictate right in there, right? And then hit enter or tab to the add button or whatever it is, right? All of that stuff is right there in a common pattern that we've had for a long time, right? So that's an alternative, again, to be more inclusive about the design practice for this. Now, ultimately, this last paragraph is basically saying how I understand that this just sounds like me complaining about really creative input methods and design and visual treatments out here. That's definitely what it sounds like. The reality is that I've also used tags and not thinking about this stuff, and badges and chips, whatever you want to call them. I've used this stuff as well, and I've also never really considered that stuff when I use them. But this is just raising things that you should think about in these small little patterns, right? Do you really need several different versions of these things when designers are just typically looking for a thing that displays status? Maybe not, right? Do you really need a tag input component when other existing elements exist that can do the exact same thing, that you really don't need to reinvent the wheel and try to support all of these different things that, unfortunately, again, you're probably not thinking of, that there's these users out there that have credit cards ready to buy but can't use your product because you did some kind of cute UI. So all these things are things that I think people need just to consider. I, again, already said that I do enjoy the tag input when I use it, but again, thinking about larger organizations, especially e-commerce, people buying things, trying to be included into things, and just making a global community of people trying to do stuff together. Being inclusive here, I think, would be a lot better and a lot more thoughtful in terms of the way that we design things. So it's something that I keep in mind, and I hope it's something that you keep in mind. But, of course, as always, let me know what you think. You can, let me know in the comments, obviously, down below, or you could join the Discord, discord.ds.house. That would be wonderful. So, moving right along to the normal, usual things that we do around here. Let's go to the challenge and see what we have for today. What do we got here? So if you don't know, the Wireframe Design Challenge is basically you go to wireframe.ds.house/challenge, and you can play along and see if you want to do like what's the gives you a design challenge, and you would think about how you might attack that design challenge. So I haven't actually read it yet. So what does it say? Let's see. Make a line shaded drawing for a casual restaurant in Aguila. Is that Aguila? I think it's Aguila. I might be butchering that. I've definitely seen the country name before. I've never tried to pronounce it. Line shaded drawing. So I actually used to love drawing. I haven't drawn in a long time, but I used to love drawing. And line shaded drawing has been up my alley. I used to draw in pen all the time, cross hatching, all that stuff. Shading with the pen used to be my jam. But a casual restaurant, I don't know anything about that country though. But a line shaded drawing, I think would be really fun now these days, especially this like organic kind of feel, kind of bursting out of the AI auto generated space right now. I think we need a lot more of the hand drawn stuff. I think that would be really wonderful. But in terms of the country and what that would probably represent, I'm not going to be at liberty to say that. So I'm just going to go to the next prompt here. Let's see what we have. Oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, here it is. It says, make a board game for a barbecue sauce brand. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so without going too much into game design, and I do have game design credits, but I'm not going to go ahead and tangent myself on that. For a barbecue sauce brand, so my expectation there is that you would have barbecue sauce related stuff, right? So think of a board game that has like pieces. Maybe each piece is a hot sauce. Maybe you actually have hot sauces as you go around the board. You need to go up a Scoville level each time, right? I think this would be great for the Hot Ones brand, a Hot Ones brand game, right? They don't have that now. They should absolutely have that. I think that would be huge for them because you'd buy the hot sauces to play the game, right? You need to refill the hot sauces to play the game, right? I think that would be incredible as a marketing strategy for people to do this stuff. Play Hot Ones at home, right? Where you have questions and you have to eat the wings even hotter and hotter. I think that would be incredible if they don't have that already. I'm not a hot sauce person, so I'm not about to go ahead and comment on anything that they might have. But if they don't have that, they should absolutely have that. I think that would be a huge sale and marketing situation. So I'm not even going to go any further than that because I think it's just a obvious home run. They should do it. You're welcome for the idea. All right, last one here. What the hell is this? Okay, make a mixed reality button for the Illuminati. What the hell are we talking about here? All right, so mixed reality button. So what does that mean? That means that it's a button that works virtually, but does something potentially in the real world, or vice versa, right? The physical button that potentially does something virtually, right? So that's mixed reality. It's in both realities. Something for the Illuminati. I don't really know what the Illuminati does. I'm not a part of it. I haven't really been following what they're doing. Is the news out? I don't even know. I haven't been reading the news about them. But mixed reality button, I think, is actually just an interesting concept overall about, again, a button in one space doing something in another space, right? So it's something like you would do like with an Oculus or a Vive or whatever, where you would hit a controller button and then something does something on the screen. But I think the thing that's important about that is that the screen is like part of the space that you're in, right? So you have like the heads up display and it's like, okay, it's showing you something. So maybe there's like, I don't know, maybe there's like a mixed reality button that's like you're in a grocery store and you're able to like touch the price on the shelf of the item and see in real time if there's any other better prices for that item elsewhere, right? I think that would be cool. Is like things that aren't interactive. We just talked about this, right? The price tag isn't interactive right now, but you can make it interactive by pressing it, and then you get some information about it. I think that would be really cool. But again, play for yourself. Wireframe.ds.house/challenge. You could go ahead and take a peek at possibilities over there. But anyway, I think that's going to be the show for today. And I have a couple of interviews that I'm trying to schedule up. If you want to be on the show and be a part of this and have your own thing that you want to talk about, absolutely come on the show. Wireframe.ds.house. Go to the bottom of the page. There is a place for you to fill out a very, very small form for you to be on the queue to get on the show. So I'm looking forward to that. I do have a really cool guest coming up in at least 2 weeks, I think. Really looking forward to having them on the show. So far, hush hush at the moment. Just making sure the schedules work out, of course. But I think that'll be it for today. So that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, please help out the show by smashing that like and subscribe button just to get notified next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design System Discord by going to discord.ds.house. Play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.
Thank you.